9:15 is the time. Thanks so much for being with us here on the Morning Mix this morning. Well, now, as promised, we have in the studio with us right now Captain Shannon Smith with the Somerset Police Department. And Captain Smith, thanks so much for coming in and talking to us today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, no surprise, you know what we're mainly here to. You come in once a month, but you know what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about the Somerset Police Department being authorized to use unmanned aircraft, a.k.a. the drone. Just give us a basic rundown of what that means and what we can expect from SPD.
Well, back last year, we looked at some outside funding for an unmanned aircraft, and as a result of that, we applied for a certificate of authorization from the FAA. Mm-hmm. As a government entity, we are not permitted to fly an unmanned aircraft without a certificate of authorization from the FAA. So we went through the process and did all this. It took a total of 8 months from start to finish before we finally, back in October, got the written certificate from them saying, hey, you are permitted to fly under these conditions. And it's a 20-page document. It's not just one single page. It's 20 pages of restrictions, basically. That's kind of what got this whole thing started. Our next step was to look for an aircraft. The outside funding that we looked for kind of fell through. Nobody's fault, but it's just the way it happens sometimes when looking for outside funding. And we started looking in for our own aircraft, and we found an off-the-shelf consumer-level aircraft, a hobbyist level for that matter. Anybody can buy one. And with that said, it's nothing fancy, really. It weighs less than 3 pounds. It has no sophisticated camera system. There are no weapons. There will be no weapons on this thing. It's the same model that a lot of people have probably seen flying already.
Yeah, because one thing now on Facebook, and I don't think it was any surprise to the police department. We see some of the comments that have been coming down Facebook. Some people are very concerned and just kind of freaking out a little. But this is, let's put it right out there. This is not some big high-tech James Bond spy plane, what you're seeing over in the Middle East. This is nothing like that. It's just that little quadcopter remote control with a normal little camera on it that basically doesn't zoom, no infrared. Is that right? It's not some big spy thing.
Precisely. The word drone gets shoved around a lot when talking about these things, but drone first came up with the Predator drone, and for that matter, the word drone may be a trademark or a proprietary name for that. If you've never seen a Predator drone, those things are pretty good size. They're 10 or 15 feet long. They're 6 or so feet tall. They carry weapons, big
they weigh a ton.
Sensors. Yeah, they're huge,
yeah.
and above all else, they're military.
Right.
What we have is basically a hobby aircraft.
One step up from a toy.
One step up from a toy. If we're even one step, really, we're using something that any average citizen can buy, and we're reappropriating it. We're repurposing it for a law enforcement and public safety purpose, as opposed to a recreational or a hobby purpose that the average Joe might use it for.
Well, let people know what the police department's intent for the use of this aircraft is. I mean, what is it meant to be used for?
Its main purpose and its primary role within our department is going to be for low-level, high-quality photography and video. It's the camera system on it is very much consistent with a GoPro camera. If anybody's those action-type cameras, it's really not a superb search platform. As we talked earlier before we went live, if somebody is out in an open field wearing bright colors, we can probably pick them out. That's safe to say.
If they're not trying to hide too hard.
If they're not trying very hard to hide. Right. But as far as getting deep in the woods and things like that, looking for somebody, One of the things that we're required by this certificate from the FAA is to maintain a visual line of sight with the aircraft at all times, regardless. So getting it deep in the woods and looking for somebody, we can't do that. It doesn't have that capabilities. But our primary role is going to be aerial photography and aerial video, low level, where we can't get our manned aircraft into safely or reasonably. I told somebody yesterday during an interview I did with a statewide newspaper that in weather situations, that's obviously a big concern for aircraft, whereas we would not launch our manned aircraft until storms moved through and got well out of the area. With this thing, we can launch a little bit quicker. Our response time might be a little bit quicker to survey storm damage. We mentioned some limited search and rescue capabilities or operations that it might be used for. One of the things that I think is going to be very helpful in the future, and this is a future hope that we can get it married up with some software that actually does three-dimensional crime scene and accident scene mapping, and it does that through taking a number, we're talking a couple of hundred photos of an area, and it stitches it together into a three-dimensional model, which will significantly reduce the amount of time that our collision reconstruction units are out on a major collision scene. And instead of taking a couple of hours to get all those measurements and everything through our total station, basically digital survey equipment, we can get it done in a matter of 8 to 10 minutes with an aerial system like this.
And instead of you having to get to the airport, hop in the gyroplane, get in the air, somebody can pull this thing out of their trunk and have it taken pictures in minutes.
They can have it taken pictures before and finished before I can finish the pre-flight inspection on the gyroplane.
Right.
So that's what we're looking at. It's a big time saver.
Well, let me continue on, and because I want to ask you some of these things that people that are the comments that people seem to be afraid of.
Sure.
And I just want to get these right out there and ask them so people can know the facts.
Sure.
Okay. One thing that I've been seeing is people seem to fear that, well, say for instance the police need a warrant to come on my property. People seem to be afraid that the police will stay off of their property, send this aircraft in, be like looking in their windows, and be able to do any of that without a warrant. That's a big fear online right now, Captain Smith.
I've read those same comments, and I 100% agree. The department 100% agrees with their concerns, and we laid that out very clearly in our news release. If you've read part of our news release on Facebook, please read the entire portion of it. One thing with this, even though it's an unmanned system, it doesn't do away with the Constitution. It doesn't do away with the Fourth Amendment. It doesn't do away with state and federal laws. All of those will be adhered to when this thing is launched, when we put this thing out on incidents or missions or whatever. If we're using it for searching for evidence, we're going to apply for a warrant. That doesn't matter if we're using a manned aircraft, an unmanned aircraft, an officer on the street, an officer in his car. All those same provisions of the Constitution still apply, and we'll still adhere to all those. So
the long and short of that answer is that anything that the police department couldn't do legally without the quadcopter, they're not going to be doing with the quadcopter.
Exactly.
Now, another one I want to bring up because, and some of these comments online have gotten pretty out there. You know
yes.
this. Well, by far, it seems to me that as far as those out there comments, the one that is the vast majority seems to be some version of, if I see this thing over my property, I'm going to shoot it down. What about that? What's the legal ramifications there? If they did come out and shoot it down, what then?
Well, I'll start out by saying, if somebody sees a white quadcopter out there, chances are it's probably not us. And the reason for that is these things are widely popular. There are a number, I don't know the exact total, but I would say numerous of them are owned by private individuals in Somerset and Pulaski County. So it's a good chance if they've got one of those in their gun sights, it may not be ours. But regardless of who owns it, and regardless if it's being flown as a government mission, for search and rescue, I would hate to think that somebody would shoot down something that's looking for a lost child, or surveying storm damage, or taking aerial photos of a collision scene, or looking for a lost Alzheimer's patient. But should they do that?
Should that happen?
In the state of Kentucky, there's still laws against criminal mischief. You can't willfully destroy or damage someone else's property. There's also wanton endangerment concerns that come with discharging a firearm. And like it or not, it's still a federally registered aircraft. And it doesn't matter if it's a 747, a police helicopter, a news helicopter, or somebody doing flight training in a 4-seat Cessna. It's still a federally registered aircraft, and federal laws apply to that as well.
So again, you might say that if you are the kind of person who does have something to fear by this drone, or I'm sorry, this aircraft, if you are someone who does have something to fear by this aircraft flying over your house, the best way to guarantee you're going to get arrested is to blast it out of the sky.
That would fast track the process, I think.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So where do we go? When do you plan on putting this thing into use, actually?
I would say in another month or so. We're not in any huge rush. We spent a long time from the time we received the notification from the FAA that our application was successful back in October until we made the purchase a couple of weeks ago. Then I went to some training on unmanned systems last week in Houston, and we're still just probably a few weeks away from our first flight. And those will be training flights. They won't see us up over Somerset. We have a designated area that the FAA has approved out in the county, away from pretty much everything except for trees and a couple of fields, where we'll do our training, polish our skills. We'll go through some mission training, some scenario-based training, things like that. Then once we've got all that stuff well under our skills are finally polished, we will call the FAA, and they will send somebody down for a site visit to go over the same things all over again to make sure that our training was productive, and we've got to where we can fly regular missions and things like that. And don't really have a time frame on that, but we're going to take it slow and make sure we have everything in line that we need to have to be able to do this safe, and to be able to do it effective, and be able to use it for the purpose in which we have intended, and that is to increase public safety. And there's a lot of things. I know everybody has concerns, but we have done a lot of things leading up to this point. We've developed our own internal policy and procedure to govern its use, to set forth guidelines that say, if you're going to use it as a evidence gathering device, then you're going to get a search warrant. It governs a number of different things having to do with it, and we've received training, and we've received the authorization from the FAA. So there's been a lot of things going on behind the scenes and in preparation for this, and we haven't even turned the rotors on it yet.
Well,
it hasn't. We haven't even flown it yet. We're still in the process of getting to that point where we can be ready and and prepared for our first flight.
Well, one suggestion I would have for people out there, if you do have questions, if you do have concerns, the people and the opinions being thrown around on Facebook are not necessarily factual. If you have concerns or questions, call the police department and find out. Don't just throw a bunch of crazy theories out there on Facebook. People are free to call the police department and ask questions about this, right?
Yeah, we have questions all the time. This isn't the first time we've been at the forefront of new technology. We were the first agency here to launch our patrol rifles. We were the first agency really to put in-car cameras in the cruisers. This hot button topic that's been going on for about a year or so called body cameras. We had body cameras for a year and a half before the Ferguson incident. It's one of those things we've been constantly trying to move ahead and move forward, take advantage of what technology offers. And, let's face it, the future of unmanned systems is here now. We've seen news reports of Amazon doing their limited package delivery. Last week in Virginia, they did the first successful delivery of medicine from an airport, I think across the holler to a health fair, but it's a proof of concept. Broadcast television is using them more and more. They're going to be used more and more in farming and agriculture. Real estate market uses them heavily, and there's another agency, according to the FAA, another agency in Kentucky that's in the process of going through the same certificate that we went through. They're going to be used in the law enforcement market, but really the law enforcement market is a small portion of the overall community that's using unmanned aircraft for the furtherance of their business or their objectives.
And it is quickly becoming just the norm and the way things are done. Well, before we wrap up here, Captain Smith, is there anything else in general on this topic you would like to share with the public before we wrap up?
I would just reiterate that we've posted our news release on Facebook, and it very in a comprehensive manner details out what we'll use it for and what it won't be used for. It's not a tool to invade people's privacy. It's a tool to increase public safety, and we've outlined everything in the news release. I challenge everybody who is out there listening, who's read the comments on Facebook and everything, read our news release from start to finish.
And read all of it, exactly, because that was the first thing I thought. I was like, when all these crazy theories started coming up, well, the police department spelled all this out in their article, so yeah. It's there, and you can check that out on your Facebook.
We didn't get into a lot of details about some of the other public safety missions that it can be used for, but fire suppression, being able to launch and give the fire department a better idea to further develop their plan of attack to put a fire out. We have railroad passing through here. If you don't have a good understanding of just how many hazardous materials are transported by railroad through here every day, it's online. You can read it and understand it. And one of the best tools to determine what type of hazardous materials may be on a collision scene or a train incident is an unmanned aircraft, because in essence, if it goes up there and melts midair, it's probably a good indication you don't want people or first responders in the area. So there's a lot of things that it can be used for that benefit everybody, not as a police tool necessarily, but as a public safety tool.
Yes, sir. Well, thanks so much. We've been talking here with Captain Shannon Smith with the Somerset Police Department. Captain Smith, again, this has been a hot-button issue today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come in and give us the information from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Appreciate it.
Great. We appreciate you having